Hi, I'm Stephanie Farnsworth. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Sunderland and I'm studying in writing Mutant Theory. And that is why today I'll be presenting the paper The Mutants of Fire Emblem Three Houses, an exploration of bio-exploitation and how humans become gods. So I look in particular at the work of Jeffrey Jerome Cohen and his colleagues, which is all about monster theory, and this idea of the categorization of the monster and how it delineates from humanity. I also blend this with Donna Haraway's work on cyborgs, and of course the popular A Cyborg Manifesto, a work at what Badminton termed fictive theory, that takes a figure in science fiction and then developed theory about that, what that figure meant, to suggest about the relationship between feminism and a growing reliance on cyber and cyborg technology. And it was Toffeletti who said in 2007, the post-human shares with the monster a confusion of boundaries that challenges what it means to be human. When I set out mutant theory, I look at the post-human quite a lot, mutants being a new type of human essentially. But it shares a commonality with monsters in that they do challenge the boundaries, and particularly the boundaries of the body. And I'll be looking at that further in this paper. So I focus on Fire Emblem Three Houses, a Nintendo game released in 2019. Fire Emblem Three Houses focuses on the war between the religious order that favours a strict class system and revolutionaries who want to move toward a system of meritocracy. So there is an entrenched system, a hierarchical system, which is centred around the main church of Fordland. The church rules over Fordland and employs child soldiers to fight its war against revolutionaries. There is a huge amount in this game that focuses on the idea of bio-exploitation or body exploitation, the recruitment of children to fight it all. But I've also shared images depicting Deju, who is a loyal soldier to the church in particular. But when the church has found no use for him anymore, in the fact that when he becomes cornered in a fight and can no longer challenge the player and is to be easily defeated, he takes what the church has given him, known as a resurrection stone, and this transforms him into a mutant monster hybrid, a mutant in that he becomes post-human and he becomes something better, but he loses all sense of his humanity and his connection. He becomes essentially a wild beast that the player and the player's allies must fight. This is a theme that happens throughout the game, of whenever someone has been fulfilled their use by the Church of Fordland, they are then compelled to take a stone that will essentially sever their link to humanity so that they may become the ultimate soldier. The church, which is unknown to many people, is ruled over by the Lady Ray. And as Archbishop, she is secretly a dragon who can transform at will. Unlike the soldiers who have to give up all free will to serve the church when they take the resurrection stones and transform into monsters, Lady Ray can transform back into a human at any time. This again shows the level of hierarchical freedom and liberty that the bishop has, while many of their child soldiers essentially have no free will and must give up their entire humanity to serve in this war. This is why Fire Emblem is a particularly good game to study when it comes to mutants, because it is a game all about not just class structures, but biological orders. So to be able to talk about monsters and mutants more in depth, I must be able to set out and define what a mutant is. This is what my research largely focuses on. Jeffrey Jerome Cohen was the one who coined the term monster theory and set out a list of principles defining monstrous characters in literature. His fifth principle is the one that relates the most to mutants. He stated that the monster polices the borders of the possible. I therefore argue that mutants are a subgroup of monsters. They are monsters who have undergone some intervention that has triggered a biological transition, such as we have just seen Deju taking the resurrection stone to transform his body. These mutants may be designed or an accidental byproduct of a resource-driven capitalist system, for example, Godzilla being the result of nuclear testing. Designed mutants are always created to enforce a supremacist ideal. So my categorization is that mutants are characters experiencing or who have experienced biological transition away from normative expectations due to some intervention. Characters in conflict with their creators, whether systems of relentless capitalism or specific individuals, such as Dr. Frankenstein at odds with his creature, or even Dr. Gero from Dragon Ball Z, who is ultimately destroyed by his android and mutant creations. All characters struggling with their creation and seeking full autonomy and body liberation. They've been, of course, created outside of the traditional norms and therefore are seen as disruptive to our society. That means that they struggle to have autonomy over their body and seek liberation. This is a theme that happens throughout Fire Emblem Three Houses. In the 1970s, Biopunk, which refers mainly to this idea of hacking your body, has been recognised as a growing subculture. In terms of literature, biopunk refers to stories of biological identities and biological manipulation. However, there has been a growing philosophy that practices biopunk, including the idea we can biohack our own bodies. For instance, the founder of Jack, some of you may know, famously thought that he could hack his body simply by going on incredibly strict diets and rewiring his metabolism. There are, of course, the Netflix series Unnatural Selection that focuses on people engaging in very simple hacking techniques of bodies and even creating glow-in-the-dark dogs. This idea of biohacking and biopunk, this DIY philosophy of biology, has many links to posthumanist movements. Michaud stated that computer hackers and biohackers who have tried to make technology more human by steering it away from military-industrial systems. And yet Fire Emblem Three Houses is a warning about the idea of a centralised post-humanist controlled centralised system where the church overrules all and has total control over body management or the order of biology. Video games in particular are a great way of looking at posthumanist and transhumanist theories. This is because they offer new ways of confronting our biology. Of course, many scholars have argued that to play video games is to position ourselves within a new realm. We are in two environments at once. We are in, of course, the gaming environment, but also our own rooms or where we occupy space and play games. And it was Lavina who said, video games, however, make the player face monsters. These creatures do become objects of the player's actions. Their rules are clearly defined and ready to be scrutinised. What we are witnessing is a major shift in our conceptualisation of monstrosity. The logic of informatic control has now colonised even the things we fear. Our monsters, previously deemed to be inscrutable and abject. And the key central point of this is that the player ourselves has an incredible amount of control over the biological order in Fire Emblem Three Houses. We can, for instance, as a player, decide to side with the church's structures, the church's ultimate control over bodies. We can also oppose the church, but in doing so, the best chance that we have to oppose the church is to recruit students and children ourselves into the conflict against the church. As a player, we also have direct control over exactly what classes a character will be. Whether we will be a knight or a mage, we will control their levelling up, we will control what they study. We may not specifically create their mutants or transform their entire bodies, but we have a huge say and a huge control over who the characters become and the way that they manifest. Fire Emblem Three Houses in particular is interesting in that it looks at religion and theories of posthuman, which often go hand in hand together, and video games provide a really good way to do that because, as I've said, they look to almost transhumanise the player themselves. And Garachi said, particularly but not exclusively due to the relationship between video gaming and transhumanism, we cannot ignore the importance of video games in the study of religion and science. We are ourselves putting ourselves in a religious, ethical conflict in philosophical discussion that has gone on for many decades about the body, the soul, who is in control and who we become when we play games. Gameplay becomes informatic and a transhumanist communion. The structure of Fire Emblem itself reinforces a sense of community building and ritual. The player oversees the development of posthuman transformations of other characters and often takes the role of creator and not simply teacher. Some of these rituals will include, of course, encouraging the students to sing at church, encouraging them to take part in religious activities, encouraging them to fish and provide food for the monastery that the player occupies. There is an incredible layer of religion woven throughout, while the player reconciles with themes of the post-human. Posthumanism, of course, and transhumanism are often criticised for this idea that we are transcending the natural order if we endeavour on their paths of trying to better our natural biological states. And Laycock stated that role-playing resembles not only religious ritual itself, but broader models of how human beings produce meaning. It is collective, it is autotelic, it is apart and forbidden in that it must be performed in a certain way and will be spoiled if it is not taken seriously. It provides a liminal state in which ordinary social norms are suspended, and it produces a unique experience of flow or engrossment. It is through this mode of serious play that humans are able to temporarily suspend the ordinary world in order to imagine alternative worlds together. So Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto stated how we would depend so much on technology that we would essentially lead two lives. We would have the virtual life that feeds into our identity just as much as the physical embodied world. Now, through that, it is natural that games that have posthumanist themes naturally lead on to us to question about mutants in the way that our biology may change. Video games offer a unique set to do that, in that as we are undergoing questioning these posthuman themes ourselves, our bodies are shifting, our environments are changing around us just by the very nature of turning on a console or picking up a controller. And so throughout all of this, the player itself acts as someone who can control other characters or non-playable characters and make them join different classes, make them join orders, make them follow the church, or compel them in desperation to take resurrection stones. It is a game essentially about bio-exploitation while we are shifting our identities into a technological age. And it was Mitchell and Snyder who argued that a defining element of late-stage capitalism was that of incapacitated bodies, that they are seen as increasingly the norm due to the exploitative nature of work, struggling healthcare systems, and how for-profit healthcare corporations recognise them as rich veins of data for ailments largely social in their making. They note there's been a shift into buying over-the-counter remedies for common colds, back pain, headaches and so forth, but these treatments do nothing to target the root cause of those issues brought on by neoliberalism. Under neoliberalism, the body as targeted is inherently lacking, and the pharmaceutical and medical industries promise not to remove but mask social symptoms as individualised adjustments to states of universally beleaguered embodiment. And it is why that Fire Emblem 3 Houses is an almost perfect game for a biotechnological age, in an age that we do have greater access to healthcare, but people also feel that there is a lack of accessibility, that there are soaring healthcare costs, or that in the UK we're facing the privatisation of healthcare, where we work longer hours but have less say over our lives, where there is less opportunity even though we're supposed to have more opportunity the more that we work. We are in a state of universally beleaguered embodiment, just as the characters are in Fire Emblem. They are forced to work every single month and pass tests. They face trials every month where they may die. Some of the characters may die permanently if the player has that setting turned on, known as permadeath. The characters then, when they fulfill their use, do not simply get to rest or even leave the church. They must transform into a mutant that is a stronger soldier but loses all connection to her humanity. All familial bonds, all platonic, romantic, all affection has been lost in this idea of serving a wider and larger machine driven by the church. And so this is the exploitative nature of work. And while Fire Emblem 3 Houses has often been compared to its take on medieval ages as we shifted to a more parliamentary state with more democracy at heart, and the Fire Emblem captures that fight between democracy and also a ruler system, actually Fire Emblem 3 Houses has a lot in common today with just the idea of the universally beleaguered embodiment and how we have suffered bio-exploitation under the age of neoliberal capitalism. Thank you for listening to this paper. I very much appreciate it, and thank you for joining our conference. I hope to see you at the next one.